This is a Truth Table public service announcement. Y'all, it is chaotic out here. Stay tuned for a message on how you can resist the political chaos. Sisters, how y'all feel? Brothers, y'all all right? If this is your first time at Truth Table, welcome to the table. And if you've been sitting at the table with us all these years, we are so grateful that you have been listening to us through these years, and we are inviting you to partner with us and support our work at patreon.com/truthstable. Now pull up a chair and have a seat at the table with us. Hey y'all, welcome to Truth Table, Midwest and Culture for Grace and Truth. I'm McKemini.
And I'm Christina.
This table is built by Black women and for Black women. So welcome to the table, C. How you doing, girl?
I'm out here doing. That is how I'm doing today. I feel the summer running away from us, McKemini. The summer is running away. It's like, you know what? It's been real. Goodbye. But let me throw back a fireball before I go, because it is 90 plus degrees where I am.
Yeah. It's hot on the East Coast too. So I was like, okay. I know it's sad. They said that they called it August. I saw a meme that said they called August the Sunday of summer. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Yes, you can feel Monday coming. You can feel it.
Right.
You know.
I'm like, no, winter's coming.
Yes,
anyway.
yes. But I was going to say, you know what? But the truth is ultimately good, and you got to deal with the truth of a matter, right? And so I'm excited for our topic today as well.
Yes, y'all. Disinformation and the destabilization of Black institutions is what's on the table. And we have a brilliant expert at the table with us. Her name is Esosa Osa. Welcome to the table, Esosa. How are you, girl?
Thank you all so much for having me. I am excellent. I am, the weather in Atlanta is still hot. And the Sunday that is August. So for a wonderful conversation.
Wonderful. Well, just in case you all don't know about Esosa, why don't I tell you just a little bit about her? Esosa Osa is the founder and CEO of Onyx Impact, an organization created to better serve and empower Black communities by fighting the harmful information ecosystems targeting them. Esosa was previously Deputy Executive Director of Fair Fight Action, a voting rights organization where she led pro-democracy reform efforts with a focus on combating adverse messaging and voting policy reform while overseeing the organization's research, communications, political, and organizing teams. Welcome again to the table, Esosa. And me and Christina have on our voting is my Black Jobs shirt. So get into that. Get into it. Okay. We're not playing. So, for our purposes of just like orientation for our audience, can you talk to us about first of all, the definition and the differences between disinformation, misinformation, and malinformation? What do those mean? What are the differences? Help us to know these things.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's so helpful for everyone to just be grounded in the same understanding of these terms, what's called this information disorder spectrum that has three main components, as you said. First is misinformation, and misinformation is simply any incorrect information, right? That is something like incorrect polling hours, would be a form of misinformation. Disinformation requires intent. Disinformation, as I sometimes say, is lies with the intent to lie. And so if someone is actively pushing incorrect polling hours to Black communities to make it less likely that they can vote, that would be a form of spreading disinformation. And then the third one that is not as talked about as much is malinformation. And malinformation is true information that's pushed with the intent to harm, or information that's based on truth pushed with the intent to harm. This can be anything from putting people's personal information online for folks to be able to uh, harass them, or hacked materials, or as we see in voting, taking a kernel of historical or current truths and harms and pushing that towards Black folks as a means to disengage them from the all types of civic work. So those are really the three main forms of this, or three main parts of the spectrum, if you will. But the main difference between misinformation and disinformation is intentionality.
Yeah, that is
Thank you.
super helpful, very clarifying. And Kimmy, as I was listening to Sosa break those down, I was like, this is a whole sermon series actually about about the intention, and also about when we think about how gossip and misleading people can be rooted from a place of, or it could be something true, a nugget of truth, but that is used in a way that is incredibly harmful. I think that malinformation one is particularly powerful as I'm letting that kind of marinate in my mind right now. And so we have all those terms, and I'm really grateful that you've helped us get this clarity. But then we have this thing called the internet, Al Gore's, Blue Ivy, whoever the internet it is right now, and the way in which that machinery, that cyber machinery, amplifies the three things that you just talked about. Can you give us a snapshot of how the role that the internet plays in the amplification of misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation?
That's such a great question, and to understand the role that the internet plays, one of the more important things we have to understand is how disinformation works. Why is it effective, right? And what we know is that regardless of your income, your education, your background, that a lot of our brains work in a very similar way. And that is that the more times that we hear something, the more likely we are to believe it's true, and the more likely other people are to believe that the more likely we are to believe other people believe it's true as well. And so what that means is that disinformation is really a problem of amplification. It's a problem of repetition. We fundamentally view repetition as truth for our brains, right? That's how we teach little kids, how to learn, right? And that's still working in our brains as we get older. And so what has happened with the internet is it's given us a way to put misleading information in front of us over and over and over again at rapid speeds, right? In all types of, not just the basic internet, but you know very prominent apps that have short video, whose entire business model is how quickly can we put information in front of people over and over and over again. And so with that type of context with the internet, things can be amplification can be very quick and very dangerous. That's why sometimes I talk about uh, uh, if the president of the United States came out every single day and told us all that the sky was green, we would eventually start walking outside and being like, I don't know, I'm not
Mm,
sure, right?
Right,
Because at
right.
that level, that platform, right, it's not just the president saying it; it's going to be every single reporter that has to cover it, every single video online that talks about it, every single article that has to cover the article, all the TV, the amount of amplification of that position is particularly um, large, and that's why it holds such a immense responsibility behind it.
So Esosa, hearing that is like, so me, I'm a news e, a news junkie, if you will, or I was, like a good first gen Nigerian American whose parents had, CNN blaring like 24/7, so I guess in some ways I think about that and I'm like, man, how do we combat? How do we discern? When we are seeing real, true, legitimate information, versus misinformation and disinformation and malinformation via media sources, right? Because over the last couple of years, we have seen the erosion of the credibility of our news and media sources. So, how do we get down to what is true? Especially for us as Christians, people who are lovers of truth. How do we get to what is really true? How do we verify what we're seeing come up on our timelines, right, on these various apps, or what's coming through on WhatsApp, right? Or seriously, there's so much coming at us, or even what we're hearing on the news. How do we get down to what is true? How do we discern? And how do we resist all of this, the mechanisms of disinformation?
Uh, that is, you know, very easy question to answer. Not really at all. That's one of the hardest
I was
questions.
like, wow, okay.
No. That's one of the hardest
Absolutely.
to
Absolutely.
answer, but it's such an
Yeah.
important one in this. You are so correct in this new this media environment that is different than even what we were experiencing 4 years ago. Right? We now have a news environment that's almost entirely online, right? And we have a news environment that where most of the apps that we use push down suppress political content of any kind. And most news is seen in some way, shape, or form as that. And so people are just on a whole interacting with news at a far lower level than we've seen historically. Good news, bad, what have you. And we've also seen that has what's happened is that there's been a crumbling in the correlation between you know content and credibility, and it's making it harder and harder for us to know who to trust because credibility is really being determined uh, inaccurately by following, right? Which is not an indicator of whether or not someone is telling the truth. And so, what I try to make sure that folks think through and have in their thoughts and their brains and their practices all the time is one, like, it's some of this is super simple. Are we double checking our sources before we're sharing content? Right? Not just double checking our sources. Are we telling our friends, family, church communities that make sure you double check your sources? That actually telling somebody that makes it far more likely that they check their sources before sharing incorrect information, for a short period of time, for like three or 4 days. So we have to keep doing that. But not only are we checking sources, I also think it's important to have, different fact check resources that folks can know about, things like factcheck.org. uh, AP has a great fact check, NewsGuard, Snopes, Ground News, Media Bias, fact
Okay.
check. And so there are resources that we can go to
Good.
fact check more. I can go on and on about best practices. We got to be careful, particularly about content that elicits a strong negative reaction. When we're scrolling through Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, disinformation needs fear and distrust to spread. And so it's much easier to do so with content that is making us super angry. Sometimes, that content can be true, but it's very important to stop, take a beat when something is making us have a very emotional reaction. Just double check it, right, before we aggressively share it. And so having those things in the back of our brain as we're moving through different types of social media and news can be very, very important and impactful.
Super helpful. And
Thank you.
I really appreciate you kind of listing for us, reminding us we don't have to be stuck in this. We could fact check. We could note the emotional response that we're having and then think more deeply about it, right? And use these resources. I am curious. Let's say there's someone who, is maybe they're doing a project in a class setting, and they want to think about what would they need to do in order to put together effective disinformation. And they're planning this project out from top to bottom. Now, by the way, don't do this at home, everybody. but I want you to help us to get inside the minds of people who intend to deceive, right? So not when we're just saying something like it's true and we haven't fact checked it. So we are spreading misinformation ourselves, but that's not our intention. I think all the people do that. But the disinformation and the malinformation piece, if someone's sitting down and thinking of a plan to do that, What are they taking into consideration? Can you, as best you can, as you study this, take us into the minds and the consideration of a person who's trying to do something like that? And what would be, and you've told us this already, but what would be their intention? What's the purpose of disinformation and malinformation?
Well, Dr. Christina, congratulations on giving me a question I've actually never received before. That is a wonderful, uh, fascinating, potentially dangerous question, but I think we can. I think we can work our way through it. I think it's actually a super helpful question in the right context. So, you know, if I were someone who would not ever do this and who was a fake person, right? Who was going to try to deceive other people, which we would all not do, and all of our followers would obviously never do. Uh, you would start by with the messenger, right? You would start by finding um, someone that is trusted, that is within the community that you're targeting, uh, and that um, has a large following. And you would also try to find an audience that you are interested in dividing, that you're interested in um, making weaker in some way, shape, or form, right? Almost all disinformation is a strategy of division. So, what types of, what particular, you know, local, state, national community are you trying to harm? And so, once you do those two things, I would, look at what types of topics right now in that community are causing the most tension, right? And I would take a nugget of truth from that, right? And I would find a narrative that can inflame uh, those tensions and increase that division with a trusted messenger. That's why these things are so believable. And to be, I cannot be clear enough that none of us should do this. And um, I cannot be. There's a reason that so much disinformation research starts off by saying, "Lord, please don't do this. This is so bad, and it's so hard to move back on. Like, uh, it's so hard to unravel." There's a reason why this type of corrosive propaganda has, taken down societies and taken down democracies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because uh, it is coming from such a trusted source, is being amplified so many times,
Mm-hmm.
and it is so hard to deter and push back on.
Wow.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
Powerful. And well, the power of a lie to take down a democracy, I think just how seriously we need to take deception, right? Especially deception that lies that we like, things that we want to be true, that kind of elicit all kinds of emotional response. So thank you for doing that risky exercise for us. And I hope that as we're listening in, we are mindful of the ways that we might participate in something like that unintentionally and how that may be happening around us. Hopefully that makes us a bit
Mm,
wiser.
Absolutely. And
yes.
again, these are things that I would not do and would not recommend anyone do. And I would also say that we have like, it sounds so, some of this sounds so ridiculous, right? A lie taking down democracy, right? And that's because we live in a liberal democracy, not liberal from like a
Hmm.
left term, but liberal from like a political science term. We live in a liberal democracy, and we don't often deal, or actually even know how to deal with, tactics and strategies of illiberalism, right? Like it seems
Yes.
so far fetched for so many of us. It's why the media has such a hard time dealing with this, because what happens when the tenets of a free press go directly against the tenets of making sure that you're pushing truth. It's extremely hard to grapple with. But so we are not the first, fifth, 10th country to deal with these types of of corrosive tactics and strategies, and we've seen other countries come out of it, and we've seen
Hmm.
many of them who are still grappling with it to this day.
Yeah, and it speaks to the fragility of democracy, yeah, of this democratic experiment. Like, are we going to keep this train moving, or are we going to derail it, by becoming susceptible to disinformation and misinformation and malinformation? Yeah, thank you so much for breaking that down. Why don't we? Oh yeah, go ahead, go ahead. So you're about to say
I was
something.
just
Go
going to
ahead.
say, what you just said is so true. The fragility of
Mm,
democracy
yes.
is such a good point, and disinformation in a way is the worst kind of poison for a democracy to deal with in many ways, because what are the tenets? It's like everyone's voice should be heard, right? Everyone has a
Yeah.
right to speak. You can't the freedom of speech, the freedom um, of community, all of these things make it so that the amplification of a bad actor is part of ensuring a democracy is abiding by its own rules, and trying to combat that amplification can be seen um, as directly against the tenets of a free democracy, right? And so it can exploit the the biggest loopholes, right? And our kind of quest to create a better and more just society.
There are levels to this, and it's a tangled web, from what I'm gathering, and even from what I've observed. But why don't we take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we are going to talk much more about disinformation and start talking about some Black institutions and just in democracy and how all of that factors in to this conversation. So don't go nowhere, y'all. We'll be right back.
Join Truth Table and believers all over the country in signing a confession of evangelical conviction. Say yes to unity in Christ and no to political violence. Click the link in our show notes. Read, pray, and share a confession of evangelical conviction. And hey, to our clergy friends out there, consider sharing this with your congregation. You can learn more about that by reaching out to us at asktruthstable@gmail.com.
All right, and we are back at the table with Esosa Osa, and we are learning all of the things about misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. Okay, get it in your brains, y'all, so that way we get it in your brains. Okay,
Come on, come
especially this
on.
election year. Okay, so so thinking about the fragility of democracy, why people would want to create disinformation and use malinformation for nefarious means. When I think about Black institutions, and even the ways in which the Black community on the whole has upheld this democracy, I can't help but think about the ways in which disinformation, these various forms, of disinformation, have seeped in into the fabric, of our community and our institutions. It's also, can you talk about, first of all, am I tripping? One, am I seeing this right? Am I, you know what I mean? Are my spidey senses on
Is
point or
this
not?
a thing?
Is this a thing? Okay, one. Two, if it is a thing, why?
So you are correct, right? We are seeing increasing levels of disinformation targeted at Black institutions across the board, especially in the last, heightened in the last kind of 2 years. But what we've been hearing, in our elections, right, that disinformation undermines institutions, right? It undermines the justice system, the voting process, right? All of these types of things. And what's the purpose? It's to erode trust, fundamentally erode trust, so that it becomes far easier for lies to spread, far easier to divide communities, far easier to pit folks against each other. It is just very difficult to spread mis and disinformation in a strong and empowered community that includes, as most strong and empowered communities do, institutions that folks trust. And so as we've seen increasing levels of disinformation target Black folks overall, it's not at all a surprise to see that disinformation target Black institutions, right? Why? So that we can erode the trust of our uh, of the pillars of our community, right? And then so that we can move. It becomes easier to uh, move folks into worse and worse spaces if they don't, believe that they can trust institutions that they've always trusted. And so I would, I think this is something that that these institutions need to be extremely mindful of is happening, right? That they need to make sure they are pushing back against. Right now we're seeing a lot of these Black institutions be called, um, you know, elitist, and folks are consistently saying that they're not doing what they are doing for the Black community. And this is a political strategy that we have seen work on a much larger level and much smaller levels to erode trust in institutions, to make it far easier to not just spread disinformation but divide. This is a I cannot explain, or I cannot uh, harp on enough the fact that this is a core component of these strategies, is to attack and erode the institutions that help uplift them. And when folks cannot trust uh, the pillars of their community, when they can't trust the news that they are seeing, when they can't trust um, you know anyone but potentially who is in their household, even then what
Yes.
you see is people just fundamentally pull back, fundamentally stay home, isolate themselves, right? And be afraid to participate, to be in community. Like, there's a reason that, again, I keep harping to other countries, that in countries where this has happened, that you get voting rates into like 30%, right? Nobody trusts anybody. Nobody knows what is true and what is not, and nobody trusts the folks that are running will change anything, because all their experience is all lies. So I'd be really really careful about it, and strongly push back against this erosion in trust of Black institutions in particular.
Wow.
Yeah, it's super helpful. As you were talking, Esosa, I was thinking about even kind of the recent narratives about the elitism of Black institutions, and really like the psychological whiplash of that. When I think about HBCUs and some of the new rhetoric that has seems to have emerged lately about the elitism of such institutions, which I'm a graduate of too. I can think about talking to people in our community who often have all kinds of internalized racism about HBCUs and referring to them as anything but elite. But I would say over the last month, this summer, the rhetoric that I'm seeing is now, oh, they're just elitists. These people think they're above everyone else. I'm like, how did this happen? It went from your best bet is to go to a PWI to now being, oh, those universities are full of elite Blacks who cannot understand us or identify with us. And so it just shows the power of the seeding of those of that misinformation, of that malinformation. And there are elitist, obviously, elements of every organization, right, or every institution, but really taking that kernel of truth and really maximizing it in a direction that is quite deceptive. I think
And sorry, not to interrupt you, but uh, what you're saying is so on point, and uh, none of us, nobody likes elitists, right? Like that's not
right.
someone's like, let me go have lunch with a bunch of, like that's not how we operate. But there is a fundamental need for education across all communities, right? And when we and when we harp in this way on uh, institutions that are furthering education, what what is their um, outlook for what a ideal community looks like if education is not a part of that, um, and I think we see this happening in other political parties that have really aggressively undermined education and the power of it, right? Who do, who are they likely who are they more likely to follow? What are they more likely to want to teach and join with their friends and family? I think it's a dangerous road to go down in more ways than one.
If you had to tell our listeners, and we just talked, I just mentioned kind of HBCUs by name, but if you had to tell them, hey, everybody, look a little bit more deeply, fact check, ask deeper questions when you see these topics come up. Based on your research and just your wisdom in this field, what would you draw our attention to say, ask deeper questions, ask questions of yourselves, make sure you fact check when you see information on these topics that seem to kind of be bubbling up all over the place?
You know, that's a great question, and I would say that we've all heard about the political power of the broader Black community, and there is and has always been genuine discontent about what change means in our political process, how often we see real change and how often we don't. But it is not hyperbolic to say that the political power of the Black community in our current electoral process is likely greater than almost any other demographic in a lot of ways because of how so much of our politics is based on margins of victory at this point. The and because of that, I would strongly advise or recommend that if folks are hearing false or misleading content that is telling you to not exercise that power, um, not engage civically, to just uh, take a moment and think about what the ultimate goal of that type of rhetoric would be. Because I have I have yet to see any type of political demographic or body retreat from the table and be rewarded
Mm-hmm.
for it.
That's right. That's right.
And if that is what folks are preaching, we should be extremely, extremely skeptical. And that is not to say that um, if you don't vote, you are a bad person. Like that is not at all what like it is a politician's job. It is our elected leaders' job to convince you that voting is in your best interest, right? That is, and if they fail to do that, they
Right.
fail to do that. Uh, but we should be extremely, extremely skeptical of folks that actively say, don't use your power in this way, or uh, there's some type of power in retreating from that table.
Thank you for that. Isosa, I'm curious, and I hear the cousins at the table, and I'm thinking, what does my cousin denouncing his or her Black Greek letter organization, whether that be a fraternity or sorority, what exactly does that have to do with what is the through line, okay, between that individual saying they are renouncing their membership in one of these Black Greek letter orgs, and how is that connected, to disinformation and even just the fundamental attack on democracy? Like, can you break that down so that we can get a clear uh, picture of how the dots connect on that? Do they connect at all?
So again, that's a great question, and I would caution anyone from spending time trying to make sense of various conspiracies. Again, you might find sometimes a nugget of truth, but oftentimes you'll run
Hmm.
in circles
Hmm.
trying to find the basis or what have you for these types of narratives. And I would say that it is we've seen it before, that especially if you put some type of um, religious uh, rationale behind a particular narrative, you are like, again, if you think of who is the audience they are trying to divide, right? Um, it is going to be Black folks that are part of these institutions. But if you find a religious narrative that can be misleading, you can get folks to um, believe in that narrative. But what we've seen, and that happens again, all types of topics, all types of things. I wouldn't get too caught up in it. But what we've seen is other bad actors now see that this is a narrative that is um, happening online and try to co-opt it. Right? They see it as an opportunity to uh, explicitly erode trust in that institution. And so it's not just that there's this religious narrative uh, uh, happening. It's that, oh, there are all of these other reasons why we should not, quote unquote, trust, which is such a big word in this topic, that we should not trust these institutions. And so uh, that's why, so like, this is just so often um, a story of grifters and bad actors taking advantage of folks uh, who actually, unfortunately, are down some rabbit holes that have them believing misleading information. And so the co-opting of this particular narrative is not surprising, uh, because it's another way to erode trust in Black institutions. But that is what we are seeing, and that is what we definitely need to fight back against.
That's helpful, and for the record, my cousins are deep in the BGLOs and they have not renounced. I was just throwing out a hypothetical. And so I just want to say that for the record, okay? We believe and we trust our Black institutions over here. Just saying.
But,
Um,
but someone's cousin absolutely has renounced
somebody's cousin
somewhere.
has to announce. Exactly.
Someone is the cousin.
Exactly. No, but it's good to hear, it's also that there are bad actors that are co-opting. So it's not necessarily that, 'cause it has been popping up so much that I'm like, are these people plants? What's going on?
Right.
So it's not even necessarily that these people have been handpicked and we're going to pay you X amount of dollars so that you can go forward and spread this or disinformation. It's more so somebody, maybe what they felt like they were doing in good faith. Let's just assume that they're trying to do this in good faith, and the bad actors come in and then they amplify that, and then begin to sow division. Is that correct? Is that the
100%.
is
Yes.
okay? So that's
They
the way that's
they
happening.
they
Okay.
they amplify, they fuel it, they feed it with other types of narratives. They take advantage of, what can oftentimes be just organic conspiracy theories that come up every single day, right? And so um, we've got to be careful, and again see who are the folks pushing this, who are they trying to divide, and um, how can we make it so that folks feel like they are still part of a community, and folks feel like uh, they are still empowered to make change within that community.
Absolutely. I've got probably a final question for you, but I'm going to pause our interview. I've got to let Jamara and Akimini, and then we'll pick back up. Just give us like 2 minutes. Let me get them in here.
Sweet. Yeah. Our friend Jamar is coming to film with us soon. So,
Oh,
this
no
is
worries.
really great. Thank you. I was just like, I was like, no, my cousins, they haven't renounced, but I, I don't want them to be like, I didn't.
I totally understand. No, it's
But
all,
it's out of control. I'm just like,
it really is, and you can see, and this is the type of um, narrative or situation that is unlikely to reach a fever pitch, but
okay.
is um, likely to it has staying power, right? It's likely
Mm-hmm.
that they'll have like an undercurrent for a long time, uh,
Yep.
and what that also means is that like later on, um, someone might be able to take better advantage of it,
Yeah.
and make it become a lot bigger than it currently is right now.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that the conspiracy has been going on for a bit longer makes it more likely that folks believe some type of it, some aspect of it is true. Uh,
Yes, yes, yes.
so, like, if in 3 years it does reach a fever pitch, people are like, well, people have been doing this for 3 years, not realizing that like some conspiracies just kind of they can marinate for a while.
And they take on a life of their own after a while. It just really can really snowball into something that's just like, whoo, um, that impossible to contain after some time.
100%.
And I remember that. I mean, there was these waves where it's like, okay, we're kind of renounced, and then it died down, and then this one, and then it comes back up. But then there were a couple of reports about this. I was like, this is great. WAPO reported on it. Who else? There was a conservative publication that did it too. I was like, this is crazy. I was like, it's yeah, it's becoming a bit much.
Mhm.
So, uh, all right, Christina, you're back. Oh, you're
I was saying,
muted.
Kenny, what were you talking about?
Oh, we were just still talking about the BGLOs and
Oh
the
God.
disinformation. It's just whew, and just kind of
That
how
I mean, that rolls through probably every about 15 years. It's just that we have the internet now.
and
So
social media. It's
everything
really
now is like,
Right.
yeah. I was like, what is happening?
it's quite intense. It's quite
Anyway,
intense. Anyway.
yeah.
Oh, well.
Yeah. So, all
Okay.
right.
Let me get my mind ready to drum up this last question. Then it can kick over to you if you want to
I
go
have
ahead
a
and
question. Yeah,
ask.
I got one more. I have one more too. But yeah,
You have an additional question. Okay. All
I
right.
do. Mhm.
So you can tell us about like how to follow your work, support your
Yep.
work, all those things, and then we'll
Hmm.
close out our time together. So we
Hmm.
really
Hmm.
appreciate you. All right. I'll count myself in.
All right.
So So we have been learning today, y'all. We really have been learning, and I'm really grateful for Esosa's time and just helping us to think more, thoughtfully and intentionally about this topic. And I really appreciate that you are looking specifically at how misinformation impacts the African American community. But I recognize that there's probably a lot more research about how it impacts other communities. And so, what are some of the differences, or maybe strategy or nuances that are distinct from community to community in terms of how it's targeted for disinformation? And what I have in mind, for example, is the radicalization of white males in our country, and what we see there may be in comparison to the way in which there may be a radicalization process for Black men in our country.
So it's a very interesting question. I would say that we know there's so much research on how you know uh, white men are radicalized on, especially online, right? Because we've seen so many of the harmful impacts of that radicalization in our society. Um, there is simply far less known about how that radicalization happens other in other communities, including our own community, and that is something that is needed. It's a gap that we see not just, in this topic, but literally name your research topic, and there is a gap in terms of how does this issue or topic affect uh, uh, Black Americans, and Black people as a whole. So what what we do know generally is that when you can when you can erode someone's trust, uh, give them some type of uh, villain, and and increase uh, the amount of fear and hate that they see consistently, right? You can radicalize them, especially online, and especially if you can get those types of topics in front of them over and over and over again. And so I think that is something that absolutely needs to be studied more, so that we can make sure we know how to best prevent it. But right now, um, it's why we are constantly pushing the power of community, the need for for messages of hope and shared values, and like a positive future vision, so that folks don't feel isolated. One of the things that we always tell people is that, like, if there are folks that are going down these rabbit holes in your family, in your community, the worst thing that you can do is isolate them even more. uh, that is not going to be helpful long term for folks that we care about. And so uh,
Hmm.
the answer is complicated and hard, but there needs to be more research across the board on this topic, and there needs to be research done with a lot of empathy about how these folks got there, um, what they're like
Hmm.
living every day, and how long it's going to take to move them to a better and healthier place.
Thank you so much. So, as you were saying that, I really was lamenting what we know, and on the research, the side about rates of loneliness, isolation, particularly as it impacts men, but men of color, Black men specifically, and just that level of vulnerability, and also just the propaganda and disinformation that creates a wedge between Black men and Black women as well. And so there is a heavy lift of work that needs to be done if that's what it means for us to have a community that really thrives and persists, right? And even beyond just political solidarity and power, but just in terms of just compassion and
Absolutely.
seeing each other well. Mhm.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was gonna touch on that too, and just the ways in which I've been observing. Let me say, the ways that disinformation has been impacting the relationships between Black men and Black women, and then also just within the diversity of the Black community, right? So the diaspora wars, all of that. Even now, people questioning the legitimacy of VP Kamala Harris's Blackness, right? Because she's first gen South Asian, but also Jamaican, heritage. So there's just a
And,
lot.
and, ne- and never in my life have Jamaicans ever been, there's never been a conversation about the blackness of Jamaicans, similar to the elitism of the HBCUs. I mean, it's fascinating how this information and malinformation work, right? So now it's planted this particular seed, right?
Yeah, it's just it's enough, And so, I would love for you to talk to our audience about how can they begin to discern based on their social media timelines, whether they be on Instagram or TikTok or Facebook, whatever, pick your platform. Um, how can they begin to discern whether the people they're following um, are really whether they should continue following them, right? How do they discern whether the person that they often go to for even spiritual messages and encouragement, whatever, whether they should really be taking what they're saying hook, line, and sinker when it comes to things. I don't know, with politics or sociologically, like how can they discern whether this is a credible source for particular topics? Like, how can you help them help our listeners discern that, and what can they do?
Absolutely. And again, it's not easy, right? As we often kind of talk about all the time, the cost of spreading disinformation is approaching zero, with some bad actors being paid to spread bad information widely and including into the Black community. And at the same time, the cost of accessing truth is becoming more and more expensive every day. How much does it cost to subscribe to a newspaper, to have all different types of television? The cost of having to discern how much time is going to take to fact check, to discern who a trusted messenger is and is not. Like, this is not an
Yeah.
easy conversation. I would say to your particular question, uh, if there are folks that you believe are super trustworthy without reproach, finding who they're following is usually good. Like, I'm pretty sure,
Yeah.
Michelle Obama is not going to be lying to me on Twitter, or what have you. Uh, and who are those like trusted people in your own local community, and that you can follow, and follow who they're following on different platforms. Two, I would say that credible, trustworthy sources that really are trying to inform are rarely inflammatory in their rhetoric. That, again, that this is not 100% of the case, but very high likelihood that if someone is, uh, if part
Yeah.
of what uh, their online personality persona requires is inflammatory language, right? That is unlikely to be a good and credible source of information. And I
And,
don't
and
mean,
often and often way too simply. So I was, as you said that, I thought like the simplicity of fiery rhetoric without any nuance. Kimmy and I have gone back and forth about Twitter and the issues with it. I'm like, I'm a professor by training and psychologist. I'm like, it's just too short. Things are too complicated for a short sentence tweet. And so, but I hear what you're saying, and I think that there's a both a laziness and a
Mhm.
negligence in speaking in pithy ways about things that are incredibly complicated and
Complicated.
nuanced.
Uh, absolutely. Nuance is in short supply at this point, right? And it is fundamentally necessary. That's why, honestly, platforms like this are so important, because you can have conversations with nuance in a way that, and reach a ton of folks in a way that you can't on many social platforms. But uh, even still, I think um, there is a there's usually a difference online between folks who may say a inflammatory thing and someone whose persona is based on continuously pushing inflammatory remarks. And because we all make mistakes, and I don't mean partisan. I mean making folks angry, making folks feel like someone is out to get them. And I can't, if regardless of what uh, the person's main message is, if part of that message includes um, putting down another group of folks, I would just really, really strongly kind of recommend against uh, following those types of folks, because that is how we seed and grow division. Not just like that's how we see that's how this you know this diaspora war is growing online so quickly. I mean, I don't know who has the 17-part checklist of who is and who is not black at this point, right? Uh, it, it is it
My, my,
is
my.
it
Too
is
much.
it is a lot,
Too much.
right? But
Right.
it may not be folks' main message. It may be a sub message, something that they talk about only so
Hmm.
often. But uh, if you see that folks are pushing division against a certain group and inflammatory, those are, I think, some of the top two ways that you can really discern who is going to be credible and who is not.
Thank you so much, Iso. So we have learned so much. I'm so grateful for your wisdom, your insight, your research, your expertise on this topic.
Hmm.
My hope and my prayer is uh, that your tribe would increase, because we need more people that are doing this work, particularly in the political and polarized political climate that we're in. Can you talk to our audience and tell them how they can follow your work? How can they learn more? Can you run down some of those fact checking sites again too, because we want to be people who love the truth, y'all. So
Yes,
Isosa, this is your time. Please talk to our audience and tell them how they
absolutely,
can learn more.
absolutely. Above all, I hope your audience is staying calm, drinking water, and checking their sources. And we'll all be a better and brighter community as a result. I think some of those fact checking organizations, PolitiFact, FactCheck.org, AP Fact Check, um, NewsGuard, Ground News, Snopes. These are all you know uh, decent places to go. And this is not to say that these folks get it right every single time, right? This is to say that it is literally their goal to strive to get it correct, which is like in many ways the best that we can do. So those are some sites, and then you can see how to get in touch with us at onyximpact.org, ONYX impact.org, and follow me on social media at Esosa underscore Osa, ESOSA underscore OSA. I apologize. There'll be a lot of NBA content in that, but also a lot of good content about how to make a better and healthier information ecosystem for Black folks.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Well, we want to thank you so much for taking a seat at the table with us, Esosa Osa. And of course, we want to thank y'all for taking a seat at the table with us this week. Let's keep the conversation going. Share your thoughts with us about this episode, Disinformation and the Destabilization of Black Institutions with Esosa Osa. Black women, we have a Black Women's Facebook discipleship group. So make sure that you follow Truth Table on Facebook and join our Facebook group today. Invite your friends to follow us on Instagram and Facebook and X. We're on there still too. Or email us your thoughts at asktruthstable@gmail.com. Don't forget to rate and review the show on iTunes and subscribe on your favorite podcast player. Truth Table has a Patreon account, so y'all can send your love offerings to patreon.com/truthstable, or you can bless us at our PayPal, which is paypal.me/truthstable. Truth Table's audio producer is Joshua Heath. Our video producer is Daryl Bradford, and Truth Table's executive producers are your hosts, Ekemini Uwan and Christina Edmondson. We'll see you soon on the next Truth Table. Bye, y'all.